Welcome to the third set of techniques which should be particularly useful for you in your teaching, and also welcome to one of my favorite tasks called Mirror the English. Now the reason why it's one of my favorites is it's easy to set up, it's lots of fun, it's got a close focus on accuracy and listening. It gives you an opportunity as a teacher to check production, and also within the group of 4 you will find that the kids check one another's language for the copy and check one another for accuracy. So it's a fairly simple task. You get 4 students to come to the front of the class. You have 2 in the middle, and the 2 in the middle are A and B. Yeah. And A and B are going to have a conversation with one another. A will have a partner, which is C, and B will have a partner, which is D. So A, for example, will say to B, "Hi, how are you doing?" Yeah. And then when A says, "Hi, how are you doing?" C copies it and repeats, "Hi, how are you doing?" At that moment, C has to listen very carefully to A. You will find that everyone in the group is listening carefully. Yeah. Then B will reply, "Not too bad, how are you?" And then D will copy B, "Not too bad, how are you?" And then A will go on with the rest of the conversation. C will copy A, and then D will copy B. What happens in this is that you can start this with a standard thing like, okay, it's the morning time, greet your partner, talk to your partner. So you can use it for a little bit of focus on the language that you've been learning, or you can use it as just a standard way to start your class so they're listening to one another, and believe me, they do have fun. Because it's a controlled activity, A and B have got to talk together and C and D have to copy. A will start saying silly things because they know that C has to repeat them. So it's lots of entertainment, but fundamentally a really good focus on accuracy in listening. And another one of my favorites. This one I particularly like because it engages translation. Now we know that in the language classroom we normally go, let's not have too much of mother tongue and let's not have too much translation, but there's actually really big benefit in using translation in the classroom, especially if we can use it to identify our weaknesses. So in this particular task, we do the same as we do with Mirror the English. So we've got the same group of 4. The only difference this time is that rather than repeating what the other person has said, we translate it. And in that translation, we get a really nice boost in our awareness of what the accurate language is, what the accurate expression is. So kids within these groups, they will correct one another. You as the teacher can use it to clarify for the class why some things that our students get wrong all the time are in fact wrong, and why other things may be right. So this is a really good thing to do. There are some examples on the next slide that will guide you more for this, but fundamentally it's the same as Mirror the English but with translation. When this happens, the students will try and correct one another. You, of course, can be engaged in the correction. You can use other models if you like, but it's a really nice way of removing some of the negative influence of mother tongue. So this is an example of Mirror the translation, and in this we have Learner A and learner B, they're having a conversation in Chinese, and learner C and learner D are translating. So A speaks, C translates. B speaks, D translates. Now this can be a really fun exercise where learners challenge one another by saying strange things, and also an opportunity for them to correct one another and improve their language. Also a great opportunity for you as the teacher to listen for errors and offer guidance. We think with what we can remember. Very critically important part of learning a new language is that if our memory of things is flawed, if our memory is of incorrect data, well then our thought process will be pretty much incorrect as well. What we want our learners to do is think carefully about what they're hearing, attend very closely to that meaning, and then tell their partner what they've heard. You can do this in a class. You can say, okay, I'm going to play you a little bit of an audio on whatever. And when you finish it, I want you to tell your partner as much as you can about what you remember. So what we're doing here is we're encouraging our learners to have high accuracy in what they remember from listening, and then rehearsing that, reviewing it by communicating it with your partner. So remember that we think with what we know, we think with what we remember. And if you can get your learners to memorize very clearly what they've heard in terms of language input, then their output will be better. Let's imagine that we're teaching a class and we want to introduce new vocabulary, and we want our learners to use it and develop fluency in it. So we go through and we teach it, we think we've taught it, but we don't actually know if our learners have remembered it. Now, if I gave you something new to memorize, you would probably appreciate it if I said, okay, take a minute to do that. And then you could think about it, you could store it, and then you could feel more confident in your use. Now, what happens sometimes in a class is that we get so busy teaching that, one, we stop our students thinking about learning, and two, we don't give them a chance to mentally organize what we have taught them. So, for example, if you teach new vocabulary, give your students time to sit there and remember it. Give them time to memorize the key vocabulary that you have taught in the class. Stop for a minute or so while they've done that. Then, if you like, they can move on to other activities. But what you will find is if you give your learners opportunities to memorize the vocabulary you want them to learn in class, only takes a minute or two, then their output, their fluency will go up. I have to confess, this is another of my favorites. The reason this is one of my favorites is it's a very simple way, a way that you can use every day with every text for reviewing vocabulary. So when you have read a text, you've done some work on it, then your kids with one another can say to each other, that word there, can you say that another way? Yeah. Or that phrase there, can you say that another way? What you're doing is you're taking a lot of their passive vocabulary and you're making it active. You're taking the vocabulary resource that they've got in their heads and you're bringing that to the forefront so that they can use it in speech and in writing. So very useful technique. It also has a benefit when it comes to checking questions. So you've got a text that you want your learners to read, and you've got some questions that you want them to answer. One of the first things you want to do is make sure they understand the question. One of the best ways to do that is look at the question and say, can you say that question another way? So if the learners can rephrase that question and it's very close to the meaning of the original, then you know that they have understood it. So can you say that another way? Really good way to review vocabulary. I thought it would be a bit of fun to show you here an example of the range of vocabulary that could be associated with the word house or home. And when you look through this, accommodation, housing, nest, residency, townhouse, condominium, etc., we see a really good indication of the fine differences in meaning that learners develop when they become truly fluent in a language. When a learner gives you an answer or learners give you answers to questions in class, that can be the end of it. So you can ask for an answer, you get an answer and you go, okay, good. And then you move on to the next question. But here we have wasted an opportunity to encourage our learners to think more, to deepen their processing of text, and also encourage in them more intelligent thinking. So if a learner gives you an answer, instead of going, okay, good, you can say, how do you know that? Why do you think that? Where did you find the answer in the text? And in all of that, you're encouraging good, clear, intelligent thought. If you want to be very good, you pre-teach those questions to your learners so that when they are comparing answers, they can use that with one another. This means you will get more intelligent discussion and more fluent use of language. When you finish a listening task, so you've given your kids a task to do, and at the end of the task, perhaps you've given them the story to read through so they can check their answers, or they can look through for words that they want to check on, and that's a very useful thing to do after a listening. Another thing you can do after you've answered the questions is you can get them to use their fingers to build the association between what they see and what they hear. So they will follow the text and they will move their fingers quickly and their eyes quickly if the words are quick. They will move their eyes slowly and their fingers slowly if the words are slow. They will stop when the words stop. And what we're doing with that is we're building an awareness of phrasing and speed in spoken English. And we're also extending their phonic awareness and building an awareness of what English actually sounds like when it is being spoken. So sight-sound association, a really nice way of encouraging the eyes, the finger, and the ears to work together to build awareness of sound in language. As teachers, we continually try to make the learning interesting. We try to make the learning engaging because we know we want our learners to be really invested in the language that they're using. Sometimes we get them to read dialogues, and dialogues are a way of encouraging practice of target language. Sometimes these can be less than interesting, but we can make them more interesting by letting our learners choose a personality. So You two have got to work together and read the dialogue. Choose your personality. Someone might go, I want to be young with a deep voice. Yeah. Someone might go, I want to be old with a high voice. or something like that. I'm not a very good actor. But you can let them choose their voice, let them choose their personality to add a little bit of a layer of interest to the tasks you want them to do. Knowing your strength is one thing, and that's a very good thing to know. Maybe even more important is to know your weakness. And for students and people in life, the awareness of your strengths and your challenges are really important to help with your growth. So with your students in class, at the end of a lesson or at the end of a task, you can say, now take 1 minute to think, and then tell your partner what you think you did well and what you think you can get better at. So in that reflection on what they've learned, they're sorting mentally what they have achieved, what they have learned, and what they haven't. Yeah. And in sharing that with their partner, maybe they can learn more from what their partner has done. You can learn about what the effect is of your lesson, and each one of those learners can get a greater awareness of what they're doing in terms of their skill development. The final part of this input on teaching techniques is on testing. Now, on the course, of course, you will have your own tests. You have quizzes after each PBT. And the reason that you have a quiz after each of these PowerPoint-based videos is so you can review and so you can be successful. The frequency of the testing is important. If you test frequently and not just a big one at the end, then the achievement rate is high and the motivation rate is high. And you want the same thing in the classroom. So you get your learners to test one another. Of course, you tell them how to do it suitably. You tell them how to make positive comments with one another and encourage one another from what they've done and how they've achieved in their learning. So frequent tests in the classroom mean that the learners get to learn more because they're reviewing more. They get a higher sense of success. And of course, you get a more improved awareness of the effect of your teaching. Have they learned what you taught them to do? So bye for now. I hope you enjoy the rest of the quizzes and the rest of the course.